Main topic time.
Here it comes.
Series 2. So Series 2 goes out 2006. We'd come off the back of the Christopher Eccleston season. We were, I think, most of us, and a lot of fans, we pretty blown away by just how good that season was. It was renewed for, I think, another 2 seasons off the back of that pretty quickly.
Yes.
Eccleston walked before the season was even over. David Tennant, I think... Now, I think this is the first point I'm going to make before we even get into the rest of the discussion. Is my memory correct that there were people saying David Tennant has been lined up to be the 10th Doctor?
I'd have to look this up. I want to say Eccleston's departure was known a week or 2 into the season starting? Or am I misremembering?
I think it was. And I certainly remember David Tennant's name being in the mix very, very early. And I definitely remember somebody saying to me, David Tennant's sort of been groomed for the role. Like, they couldn't give him to him first, but they're keeping him on side and he's going to get the role second. So he very much felt like he was going to go into the role. But we're going a bit too quickly. Let's pause. Yes. Rob, your memory of being a fan as Series 2 was coming out.
Well, I certainly was there, and I was a fan. I watched it as it came out. The Christmas invasion, obviously, had happened at this point, and I'd felt a bit iffy about that, primarily because the Doctor is not in a lot of it. They've got him asleep in bed. And, it's actually not a bad story, but at the time when that was my first taste of David Tennant as the Doctor, I was kind of iffy. But by the end, I knew this was a Doctor I wanted to see more of. And suddenly we get into Series 2 and whoosh, we've got more alien worlds than the season before. We've got the companion relationship thing firing in a different way to what it did with Eccleston. The series quickly moves into, I want to say, an Imperial phase. Do you know that term, Dave? If I say
yes,
Imperial
yes.
phase? Okay, yeah. For listeners, Neil Tennant from the Pet Shop Boys, appropriate, because he's another Tennant. And actually, David Tennant named himself after Neil Tennant, if you didn't know that.
And they had the song It's a Sin, which is what Alexander covered. It's all connected.
Everything's connected, as Dirk Gently would say. Well, Neil Tennant from the Pet Shop Boys listeners coined it once to describe his own band's just that phase you get into where everything you do is golden and everything you put out is great and you can do no wrong. He called it the Imperial phase. So if Series 2 of Doctor Who isn't the Imperial phase, it's going pretty close, which when you consider it only launched the year before is just incredible. It's really good stuff. So I watched it, and at the end of it, I was still smarting a little that Eccleston had left and that I'd got to the end of the second series and we're already on to our second Doctor. But I also felt that Tennant was pretty perfect as a Doctor. I just couldn't stop watching him. I think he'd nailed the role.
Yeah, so look, I remember watching this series, and to give our UK listeners particularly some context, this is still back in the period where it took about 3 to 4 months for the ABC out in Australia to broadcast the new series in Australia. So I know myself and a lot of my friends in fandom were, and I can admit this now, I think we're outside the statute of limitations for illegal downloads. But, we were getting onto whatever the illegal downloading platform was at the time, and you'd wake up on a Sunday morning in Australia, you would get onto the internet, you'd find a torrent of the new Doctor Who episode that had come in overnight. You'd set it to download. You'd walk away, have breakfast, have a shower, do a few chores, and sort of watch 1%, 2%. And if you're lucky, an hour or two later, you had an episode of Doctor Who that you could sit down and watch.
Yeah.
On a computer, and we're not talking a high definition, high res download either. We're talking 300 meg sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we weren't watching it in the best of circumstances. So that's sort of how I saw this series. The big thing that I took away from it, and the Christmas invasion really enhanced this. Myself and a lot of the people I was talking to in fandom at the time locally really liked Series 1. We really liked Eccleston. We were surprised at how much we liked Billy Piper. Mm-hmm. We also had this sort of ongoing resentment's not the right word, doubt's not the right word, negativity's not the right word, but a blend of sort of a bit of all of that about the fact that this wasn't quite the Doctor Who we remembered from our childhood. It was a little bit more populist, a little bit more, we use the word soap opera-ish. It's not quite correct, but it encapsulated that sort of feeling. Now, we didn't sit there and go, well, this is terrible, we're never watching it, it's awful. We said, but we would say, you know what, We wish it didn't have all this soapy stuff in there, but we appreciate that for it to be the number one show on a Saturday night, that's what it has to have in 2006. We accepted that was part of it. Now we didn't need to know who the companion's mum was. We didn't need to come back and visit her. We didn't need to know who the companion's boyfriend was. We didn't need there to be sexual tension in the TARDIS because, we're sad fanboys who just want lots of cool monsters and lots of alien races and William Hartnell as the Doctor.
Yes.
Those days are gone. So we accepted it and we understood why. For Doctor Who to be a success, it couldn't be the show that we wanted. It couldn't be Babylon 5 or Firefly, shows that would have a very small niche audience and be cancelled before their time. But that tension really defined Series 2 for me. And as I'm watching it back now, kind of free of that tension, that's going to be a big frame through which I'm going to talk about this rewatch that we've done. And my other big memory is to do with the spoiler men, which I'll get to when we get to the relevant episode. In terms of David Tennant, I didn't really know him. I'd seen him in Taking Over the Asylum. I'd seen him in The Bill, where he was exceptionally good, memorably good in that episode of The Bill. And if you haven't seen that, I strongly encourage you, if you can, go and find his episode of The Bill. He is so good in that. So that's my memories. Rob, thoughts going into the rewatch?
Yeah, well, look, I've already given away so much, so I wasn't dreading this. It's always been a series I've been pretty okay with, and obviously one I think that's come in for a bit of revisionism and a bit of stick over the years from fandom broadly. And I'd hear these things out there and think, wow, that's not my experience at all, at least not how I remember it. So, although there are some episodes here that I'd maybe seen every year or two for the past 15 years and I'm quite familiar with, there are others I'd barely seen at all since transmission. So, I was looking forward to this concept of watching it all again in order and seeing if the memory cheated, or was I right all along, or what was the situation going to be, because there is, I'm not sure if you'll agree or not, to me, there is kind of sort of a revisionism and a bit of a backlash against Tennant and this season out there.
There's certainly a backlash against Tennant a bit. That is certainly true. Against the season, I'm not sure. Possibly a little bit.
I was thinking in the way people say, Tennant and Piper, they're so smug and it's just so terrible. And,
Now, you see, this is my problem, because I can't really call that a backlash because I was saying it at the time.
Okay.
And that's sort of, my thoughts going in. I was quite surprised. I know that there are a number of episodes of Doctor Who across all of the seasons that I have watched once on transmission and never gone back to. That is the big difference for me between the classic and the new. Every classic season, every classic story I've seen many times, and I will go back and watch a whole season, even the bits I don't like. New Who, I will rewatch episodes, but I will pick the ones I want to rewatch. I was really surprised, though, when I went back to rewatch this. I did a bit of a count. 6 out of the 13 I have not watched since they were first broadcast in 2006. So for almost half the seasons, it's only the second time ever I've seen it.
Wow.
So that was really interesting for me. I have long had the view, and I certainly had the view going into this watch, that this was comfortably the weakest of the RTD seasons. Like, comfortably, by some margin, the weakest of the RTD seasons, possibly the weakest of the first 5. So that, again, is something I was sort of looking for. Like, have I been overly harsh on this? How does it perform? And there is a certain element as well, and I thought about this as I've watched a lot of fans on Twitter and social media in this last few weeks receiving their Season 24 Blu-rays and going, isn't this a wonderful, fun, rompy season? How much we're enjoying this. And I go, gee, we weren't saying that in 1987.
No, not at all.
We weren't saying that in 1987. But when you're watching an episode of Doctor Who and the whole series hinges on this being good, you judge it one way. When you watch something that is broadcast, it's now, what 15 years ago,
yeah,
you don't have that expectation, you don't have that judgment, and you can look at it differently. So they're all the frames around which I am watching this series. Any points you want to make in general before we go into the episodes, Rob?
No, I reckon we should rip in, Dave, because there's a lot to talk about.
Well, would you like to kick us off with New Earth?
I can indeed. New Earth, I think aside from a pretty weak resolution, which is, spoilers everybody, mixing every drug in the world to cure every disease in the world, and then doubling down on how stupid that is by then letting the cure suddenly become just touch. People who got touched with the solution can now just go up and touch another person with all these diseases, and they get cured as well instantly. It's a bit silly. But aside from that, I think this is actually a really entertaining sort of story. You know, Tennant and Piper have a lot of fun with the body swaps. And in fact, since I watched this, and my wife was sort of watching over my shoulder, because she's seen all these episodes too, but she was watching over my shoulder, that particular bit where Tennant is possessed by Cassandra and he says, "You like it," to Billy. That's just become a common refrain in our house ever since then. You like it. Whether it's making a piece of toast, you like it, or whatever. It's quite fun. But the Cassandra story, to mention her, has real pathos. You know, when we go back and see Zoe Wanamaker at that party, and it's the last night she told she was beautiful, and the twist is that it came from herself, and then she died in her own arms. You know, that's some really nice writing, and I've always tended to like this, and I've seen it a bit over the years too, so nothing's really changed for me on it. And I've actually done some scores here, Dave. I've thrown a 7 out of 10 at it. I'm pretty okay with it. It's not genius, it's not brilliant. I'm okay with it though.
Yeah, I'm okay with it too. This is an episode that very much went up in my estimation watching it back for the second time ever. There are things in here that I don't like, I'll get to in a moment, but as a piece of 45-minute enjoyable Saturday afternoon television, which I can now judge it as, because it's not the big new opener of the big new season and how's the new Doctor going to go and how's the new series going to be. It's just, hey, I'm going to watch this and have a bit of fun. It absolutely works. And yeah, look, getting Zoe Wanamaker actually to appear as an actress, a three-dimensional actress, rather than just a voice on a bad special effect, it adds a lot to it, and she certainly sells those final moments in a way that perhaps wouldn't have otherwise worked. It's not a strong dynamic opener, but it is a comfortable opener for a mainstream audience, and I think that's the right decision to make.
Yeah, and the cat makeup is fantastic in this.
The cat makeup is very impressive.
Yeah.
And there's some really quite dark moments in here as well. I think that we've only appreciated, since Russell T Davies left the show, just how black that man can be.
Oh, there's dark moments in all these stories.
There is, but I think we at the time of watching them, we sort of thought of Russell T Davies as fabulous, marvellous, having so much fun. You know, that's the sort of avuncular personality that we had. We didn't quite understand just how black the guy's writing could be, but looking back now, you certainly see it in even something as sort of light and fluffy as this. I was very interested that I went into these episodes remembering that I loathed the Doctor and Rose in this season. Mm-hmm. So I was very interested because I really like David Tennant in this. He's really charming and engaging and fun and energetic. I really liked Rose in this. She's really strong. Her stuff with Cassandra's really good. But Rose and the Doctor together, I still disliked.
Okay.
I don't like the way they work with each other. How that evolves over the season, we'll see. And I also noted it was the first reference to the Lonely God, which is just something that makes me go, don't like that. He's not a god. He's just a bloke wandering the universe aimlessly.
It's just thrown in there. And another thing that's thrown in there is the face of Bo. I'd forgotten those scenes were in there. And there it is. There comes the music. There he is. And they just get into this sort of mythos and world building straight away, because that'll become a much bigger thing. It's
really weird as well. He's in there and it's sort of made a big deal of, and then he says something cryptic and buggers off.
Yeah. Yeah. Earlier on, the cat's like, "Oh, he's dying. It's so sad." He's not dying at all. He just beams up to the Enterprise or something. I don't know what happens.
He's not dying. He's just bored. No, look, this was a fun, simple story. I haven't given marks out of 10, but as I'm going through, I promise to give a letter grade. I'm giving this a simple C.
Yeah, C is fair. Tooth and Claw, Dave, is next. Do you want to lead with this one?
Tooth and Claw, another one that I've rewatched for the first time. This was nothing like I remembered it.
Really?
I could have sworn that Prince Albert was in this story, and he's clearly not.
Wow.
The wolf was in far more than I remember it being. I'd forgotten a whole lot of the subplot with the servants. And there's some really good story in this. There's a really good cracking yarn in this. And I thought it was very, very good. It's very by the numbers, but it's a fun adventure. It's better than I remember. Couple of negatives, though. Rose and the Doctor are bloody annoying in this. And that clouded my entire memory of this. When I was looking back at this story, I said, that's the one where the Doctor and Rose are just so juvenile and so annoying. They're not taking it all seriously, and that clouded my whole judgment. But again, when they're separated off and they've got the Rose plot and the Doctor plot, they're fantastic. They're brilliant. So my memory was cheating there as well. They were far better than I remembered. Queen Victoria, I've got to say, is terrible in this. I don't think the performance from Miss Collins is particularly strong. I think the writing is terrible, and it's the no-effort cliche version of Queen Victoria. It's not the actual Queen Victoria who... You read her diaries, or you read about what others wrote about her, particularly at this time of her life, and she was a very fun, witty, lively companion. You know, yes, she was in mourning for a long time, and yes, she was very austere in some ways, but people talk about this real bubbly personality that she had, and it's not here, and I don't think she was played well, so that was a big detraction. But the ending was really cool. We need to talk about the Torchwood thing, but look, yeah, I was impressed. My bad memories of this were only a small part of a much bigger and better story.
Yeah, I mean, I've made a note that this is the episode where Tennant and Piper get very matey and they're having a laugh and, you know, all that, even more than in the previous episode.
Yeah, and they're up there with the Channel 9 commentary team as the matiest mates who ever mated on television.
But at the same time, I want to say, across these episodes, I don't think it's as much of a thing as people make it out to be.
Yes.
Because here we've had the first episode where it didn't really happen. Here, yes, it's happening. I mean, it actually makes me laugh. Like when Piper does her Scots accent and Tennant's like, oh, no, don't do that. And she goes, hoots, mon. That's actually pitch perfect. I laugh out loud when I see that.
Yes, that was good, yes.
So that's good. And like New Earth, I've never really had a beef with that story. I think I've always thought it was quite fun. The explanation for the werewolf is credible. I don't know why the monks had to be kung fu monks. Well, I guess it was for the spectacle of getting into those red outfits and, you know, zooming through the air and doing gymnastics and things. But they didn't have to be that. You know, that almost takes me out of it. It's like, why are these blokes bloody kung fu monks in the middle of Scotland?
Whenever something like that happens, I try to imagine Russell T Davies going, the monks are going to be kung fu monks. Don't ask why. It'll just be marvellous. It'll be so much fun.
Yeah, exactly right. So yeah, look, there's a lot to enjoy here for me. It's another I've seen a bit over the years, so I'm very familiar with it, and I think it's slightly better than New Earth. I threw a 7.5 at it.
Yeah, I've given it a B. The weak aspects are there. There are horrible Rose and Doctor moments. Victoria is poor, but they are not nearly the whole story. There's a lot of good going on here, and I think it is a shame that in my memory and in the memory of others, I think those negatives have detracted from a pretty good cracking story. Torchwood is obviously founded here. I don't think we need to say much more than that, other than I think by this stage we knew that Torchwood was a thing that was coming. We knew there would be a series called Torchwood.
Yes.
Yes, so this was obviously, they're doing an arc. Ooh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. It gets mentioned a few times throughout this season, too.
So, yes, you've given it a 7. I'm giving it a B.
Okie dokie. Next up is School Reunion, and I'll take the lead. This one I remembered being all about DeFeels, you know, because how great was it to see Sarah Jane back, and how great was it to see K9 back, and I don't even like K9, and I was happy to see him back. Plus there's all this great dialogue, like Mickey saying, oh, the missus and the ex, you know, and all that sort of thing. Again, it's another story I've seen a bit of over the years, but I think in this case, it's kind of a game of diminishing returns, as the more you look at it, the worse the creatures look. there's so many loose ends that don't feel credible, like, all the school staff being eaten, and that's fine. Or a kid blows up the school, and that's fine. I get that it's meant to appeal to kids, and kids apparently want to blow up the school, but even as a kid, I think I'd be a bit shocked at someone blowing up the school. What are you doing? You can't blow up the school. Anyway, I sound down on it. I'm really not. It's still actually an 8 out of 10 story for me, if the truth be told. But I have found that the first impression it left on me was huge, and it's diminished over time in this case.
I agree with some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just reminisce, though, for a moment back into 2006. The night before this came out, so the Saturday evening here in Australia before we saw it on a Sunday morning, was the Bucks night for a friend of ours in this circle of Doctor Who fans that I was a part of. And we started off with a big steak dinner. We had a tradition in this group that at Bucks nights we all went to this particular steak restaurant, and the Buck had to eat a kilo of steak.
Oh my God.
So we had that tradition, and our waitress for the night was called Sarah Jane.
No.
Fair dinkum. And I just remembered, like, the whole night was kind of framed through this thing of, like, we all know we want to get up tomorrow morning and watch the episode with Liz Sladen in it.
Yeah.
It was a really big thing.
Did any of you make a gag at the time, like, instead of a tear Sarah Jane, like a beer Sarah Jane or a steak Sarah Jane? Did you do any of that?
There were definitely jokes made at her expense, and she was a very good sport to just roll with them.
I hope you tipped her well.
I hope we tipped her well. My memory is we did. We were buying kilo steaks for the group, for the Buck. We were spending well. Don't worry about that. Look, I rewatched this, and I actually had to make almost all of my notes at the end of it rather than through it, because I absolutely love this episode, and I loved it again watching it. I disagree with you about it being diminishing returns. I actually think that as this goes on, it is aging really, really well, and I just enjoy the feeling of it. I enjoy Liz Sladen. The lines you mentioned are all great lines. I think this is Mickey's best episode in the entire series. Anthony Stewart Head is in Doctor Who now. He's perhaps not as big a name now as he was in 2006, but he was huge in 2006. He's coming off Buffy, and he was the big star going to, in a couple of years' time for Merlin, and everything that Anthony Stewart had in was big at the time. And
Little Britain had him.
Yeah, he was probably at the height of his career at that stage, and just seeing him in Doctor Who, he does a really good job. I love him there. The adventure's simple, but I don't care. Rose and the Doctor are much better here, and I suspect that being written by somebody other than RTD is actually a good thing.
And that's bearing out my comment that they're not obnoxious in every episode.
That's absolutely right. They're really not. In fact, the dialogue between Rose and Sarah Jane is some of the best stuff in the episode. Although the dialogue between Tennant and Sarah Jane, and for me, this is where Tennant arrives in the role, where he shows he really can bring it down a notch and have that that real power and depth to the Doctor that I really look for. I think that's here. Is it perfect? No. Look, I agree with you. The Krillitane effects, they have dated terribly. They don't just look like, slightly older bits of CGI. They look like bad CGI. Yeah. They have aged very, very badly. But that's really my only criticism of it. Yeah, it's simple, but I don't care. I do wonder what the kids made of K9, whether a kid, watching for the first time at the age of 8 or 9 in 2006 would have gone, that's a cool robot dog, or whether they're like, what the hell is that? Don't know the answer to that. Genuine question I put out there. I'm giving this an A.
Yeah, well, A from you, 8 out of 10 for me. It is a good episode.
Yeah, it really is. I really enjoyed watching that one back. And look, this is one I have watched a few times since. It's one I'm very, very fond of.
Okay. Girl in the Fireplace. Do you want to take lead on this, Dave?
Girl in the Fireplace is an episode that I, again, have not watched for 15 years because I detested it when I watched it the first time.
Really?
It comes between two brilliant Stephen Moffat episodes. I think that Empty Child is one of the best episodes of New Whoever. I think that Blink is one of the best episodes of New Whoever. And I can't stand or couldn't stand Girl in the Fireplace. So I was kind of watching it, genuinely trying to give it an open mind, and there is a lot of good in it. I will say that the spaceship effects look really dated now. That is a shame. The playing with time is really interesting, and I'd forgotten just how much they did with it and how they had all the different rooms around the spaceship with all the different access ways. I just thought that there was one fireplace in one room and everything. So there was more to that, and I was really engaged by that. It's got some nice moments. What's that ticking? That's a really cool moment. The design of the robots is a really cool design. However, I hate the kiss.
Right.
I don't buy the romance. I think the second half is really slow, and it's a little bit schmaltzy, and I think it does hinge entirely on whether you buy the Doctor falling in love with this woman. And I also can't help but judge it a bit through the prism of now having seen Amy Pond and the 11th Doctor, and being very uncomfortable with the whole implications of the obsession that the Amy character has with the Doctor, that she meets this man as a child and becomes obsessed with him and sexually obsessed with him and all the rest of it. That there is a proto version of that happening here with Madame de Pompadour, and that sits very badly with me. You know, this bloke that she met for 3 minutes as a kid, and now she's grown up and she's sexually excited by him, and it's all a romance. I don't buy it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It is unfortunate that, yes, I am seeing it through the Amy prism. So, although I like this episode more, and I saw a lot more positives in it, and the first third is really clever, it's still not a pass from me. I give it a C+, which I think is
Wow.
It's better than I would have expected going into it. I would have given this a D or even an E going into it. So it went up in my estimation, but only so far. I don't buy what's at the heart of this.
Well, we're going to diverge here quite a bit, Dave.
Oh, awesome. I like it when we do that.
Because to me, this was a revelation at the time. And I think for a lot of fandom it was too. I think it's very popular out there in fandom.
I am very happy to say that the majority of fandom opinion is on your side on this one, not mine. I'm very aware of that. I'm very aware I'm in the minority, but I stand by my views.
Okay, for me, we had the Doctor here as a dashing young hero for the first time since maybe Davo, you know. Of course, he's pushing it further and he's goofier than Davo ever would have been, but it works. The premise to me is great. We get one of those unquiet dead endings where, you know, like we learn how Dickens died. Here we have the Doctor told that Madame de Pompadour has died and all of that. That's a great ending. But before all of that, those clockwork robots, you're quite right, are really beautiful to look at. They're a real mystery. The creepy ship with the human parts built into it, like the beating heart when Mickey looks behind that hatch and there's a heart in there. It's like, oh my God, this is Event Horizon or something. Yeah. This is quite nuts.
Let me emphasise, that stuff was really cool, and I'd forgotten, and I was really impressed by it this time.
Cool, yeah. So this has got a bit of everything to me. Even the absurdity of having the horse on the spaceship. You know, I see that and I just laugh. To me, this is Moffat just having a laugh, and it's great. And I'm giving it the biggest score I've given any of these episodes thus far. This is 8.5 out of 10 for me, even after all these years. I love this.
No, that's really cool. Look, if I was judging the first third to half, I would give it a very high score. I don't like the second half, but that's fine. Look, it landed for you, and that's great.
Yeah, I particularly like too where the Doctor thinks once the mirror is broken that he's trapped, and he's going to have to, you know, go the long way around basically to get back to the TARDIS. I love that sort of stuff in Doctor Who, where the Doctor thinks he's lost the TARDIS or can't, or is trapped somewhere. I love those kind of conundrums and wondering how they'll get out of it.
No, that's fair enough.
Moving on, shall we do these two-parters as just like one overall story?
That's how I've done my notes, so I'm very happy to.
Okay, so we got the rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel. Now, this is a story I've seen sparingly over the years because I've always had it in my head that it was a bit rubbish. I didn't like the idea at the time of this alternate backstory for the Cybermen at all. It's like, no, the Cybermen are the Cybermen. They don't need an alternate backstory. This is silly, particularly when it's just like an Earth businessman turning them into essentially robots, like stampy robots. I'm a little easier on it nowadays, but at the time, this was yuck. But again, watching it again, all the bits that were good the first time around, some jokes, some good characters like Mrs. Moore, all of that was still really good. And I didn't mind the rest. Of course, I still roll my eyes a bit at the Cybermen stamping around and being robotic and all that stuff I just mentioned. But broadly, it's fine. It's still not the, you know, quotation marks, epic two-parter I think they want it to be. But I think it's better than I thought it was, and I'd probably throw a 7 out of 10 at it. It's in that sort of territory for me.
Yeah, interesting. I alluded earlier that I needed to talk about the spoiler men.
Right.
we talk now about, Doctor Who rumours and spoilers and how tight Chibnall keeps everything. I can remember just how desperate the production team was to try and convince us that the Cybermen might not be back for series 2. Like, I know we did the Daleks last time, and you all think we're going to do the Cybermen this time, but we might not, until we say it. It's not happening, and it's all just rumours. And we again in our circle of friends started to refer to them as the spoiler men from then on in, because you can't say Cybermen, the production team say, and even now occasionally in a conversation we'll just reference spoiler men rather than Cybermen. So just a fun little thing. Then my memories of this, Rob, were very similar to yours. And I have rewatched it since, but not for a long time. I watched Rise of the Cybermen. At the end of that, I was actually really enjoying myself. I thought this is a really fun adventure. It's got its faults. Now, I stand by my view that Roger Lloyd-Pack is the worst piece of miscasting in the whole of Doctor Who. I don't know whether he could have done a better job and the direction was wrong. And, this is an example of that. But you've got this sort of adventure going on, and then you cut to Roger Lloyd-Pack sort of doing and now I will do a bad thing because I am the bad guy.
On Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah. It's so bad. And unfortunately that performance completely fails to sell until really his last scene, this idea of the desperation that is driving him to do it. Like, I can see what the script is wanting him to do. And if this was a man confronted with his mortality and his failing health and his frailty as a human and desperate to live forever, I could buy that. But instead he's sort of doing this Superman comic villain thing, and it's terrible. And I also don't quite buy that the answer to I want to live forever is to become a Cyberman. Because given that he's deliberately cutting their humanity out, it doesn't quite work for me. So that...
To be fair, though, they convert him against his will.
True, but he's still created this thing. Like, his aim is to be a Cyberman.
Yeah, but maybe with a mind.
Maybe. Look, maybe. So look, I've emphasised that point because I think it's a big bad point. But at the end of it, I was really enjoying this. I was enjoying the setup. I was enjoying the alternate reality. The stuff with the earpods where everyone just stops and gets downloaded is just stupid, but it sells a point. I get that. Whatever. Don't worry. They'll all stop it. And they'll all have it downloaded, and it'll be really good. Like, okay, fine. But that first episode was a cracking little adventure. I really quite enjoyed it. It completely falls apart in the second episode. Yeah. I think that it is a missed trick with the Cybermen. The story of Cybermen, and Moffat did this better when we got to World Enough and Time. And I think we've said on the podcast many times, you and I both love World Enough and Time.
Yes.
That sense of utter despair and utter desperation where you have no choice but to become a Cyberman, to give up some of your humanity. That is a really important part for me of what makes the Cybermen work. And the idea of just sort of being hypnotised and then pushed into a room where a cartoon pair of scissors and some lasers turn you into a robot doesn't work for me. It just doesn't. The resolution's really trite and tacky. There's lots of action that doesn't quite work. Yeah, there's some nice characters, but I thought I was going to love this halfway through. If I was giving Rise of the Cybermen a grade, it would be a B. Age of Steel would be a D. Altogether, some good adventure, let down by some terrible acting, some bad resolutions, C+. Did enjoy it, but let down by the ending.
Isn't it interesting, though, that the Cybermen here, they just cut out the brain and stick the brain in a machine, essentially. So it's not even like the old Cybermen where there was a human body augmented. There's no body at all, aside from the brain. But then they're removing all the emotions. And it's like, well, that's kind of what the brain is good for. It's a very strange setup.
It is. Do you remember going back, Rob, when everyone was wondering if Mrs. Moore was going to turn out to be Ace?
Really? No, I don't remember that at all.
Oh, I do. There's like, Mrs. Moore, that's a code name for someone. Maybe she's Ace,
Wow.
I think people were certainly expecting her to be more than she turned out to be, which is a shame because she's probably one of the best characters in this. I will also add, because I've been quite negative, the Ricky, Mickey, Jake stuff is fantastic. That's really clever. It's really well performed. It's really good to look at. I really enjoyed their little subplot, which again kind of comes to an end early in the second half.
Yeah, true. Next up, Dave, the Idiot's Lantern, and appropriately, 'cause I know you like this episode. I know that already. You've got the lead on this.
I have, and I do. I love this story so very, very much. I, again, have almost no notes here because I just got utterly enthralled in this story when I was watching it. It is so easy to watch. It is so lovely to watch. The Doctor in the 1950s is just a perfect setting. They capture that vibe really well. I feel like I know the characters. Yes, they're a little heightened, particularly the dad, a little heightened, but that's television, and it's certainly television when you've got Mark Gatiss writing and RTD script editing him. Like, what else are you going to get? It all works well. I think it's a really cool villain. I love the resolution, the action, the Doctor on a tower in the wind having to do techie stuff to make the world safe. Look, it's not a classic, it's not a big epic, but it is so lovely to watch. It has a message. The message is not rammed home, but it is so clearly there, and it's such a heartfelt one. This is another A for me. It's there with School Reunion as just a really enjoyable watch and one of my favourites of the season. Love it so much. Rob, do you agree with me?
Well, before I get to whether I agree with you or not, I want to mention just Rose broadly in the previous episode and this. More examples of Rose not being, over the top with the Doctor. She at the start of this story, she's having a bit of fun because she thinks they're going to see Elvis, and that's kind of cool, but it's not too over the top. And in the previous episode, I was remiss to not mention that she just wants to go off and do her own thing and not be with the Doctor at all. She wants to go and find a family. So another couple of examples of the Doctor and Rose not being overbearing in these two episodes.
It is helped by the fact that she loses her face for 2/3 of it.
Well, that's right. She's sidelined and the Doctor gets a different companion in the form of the young boy. Tommy. But when she is doing her thing, this is something I wanted to mention about Rose in general in this series. Particularly in The Idiot's Lantern, she tries to be like the Doctor. Here where the Doctor tears off on his moped, she stays behind and talks to the mother and, stands up to the father and all of that sort of stuff. But vitally, although you could say she tries to be like the Doctor, and I do say she tries to be like the Doctor, and say exactly the same of Clara in later seasons, the way Rose does it here, I never find obnoxious or arrogant like Clara. So that's just something I wanted to just tease out to the side here. In this story in particular, I see it a lot. She's trying to be the Doctor, but it's done so much better than Clara trying to be the Doctor.
I agree, although I do think she sails dangerously close to it at a few points.
Okay, that's fair. Now, to answer your question, this is a story I haven't watched much over the years because my perception of it has been a bit meh. And I know you've always championed it on the show, and every time you've done that, I've thought, why, Dave? Why?
I have occasionally got that sense from you. Dave's going on about the Idiot's Lantern again. Okay, I'll just let it pass.
Indeed. After this viewing, however, I felt a bit warmer towards it. It's got the decent location shooting. It's got the interesting premise. There are some good performances. I think the dad, you raised the dad, I think the dad is interesting insofar as he's almost warm towards his son in the first scene, and that actually surprised me because I remember the dad was a bit of a bastard. But in the first scene where he's like, oh yeah, we might get a TV, son, I ruffled his hair. I could be totally inventing that in my head, but he was somehow warm to him, I think, when they were talking about getting a television. But then in the rest of the episode, he's just this red-faced shouty man. which were you saying it was a heightened sort of thing?
Exaggerated, perhaps?
Exaggerated, yeah. That's made him a sort of interesting character, although I still couldn't quite get into that relationship myself. But overall, I thought this actually isn't as bad as I thought it was. Sometimes the memory does cheat, or maybe just sometimes you mellow over the years. And I'm throwing a 7 out of 10 at it.
Okay, I can accept that. Just as I know that I am not as big a fan of Girl in the Fireplace as many people. I know that many people are not as big a fan of The Idiot's Lantern as I am. That's okay.
Touche.
The next big two-parter, and Rob, you're going to lead us on this.
Yes, now we move on to The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. And going into this rewatch, I would have said these are the two episodes that are my favourite.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think they're really good. But maybe they're not as good as I remember.
Are they still your favourite?
Well, let's get to the end of the season and we'll see. Because Cards on the Table, this still rates pretty highly with me. This is still around 8.5, that sort of proposition for me. But some things really stood out. Like, the first episode seems to go on forever and ever. You know, some of these rewatches just felt they sped past. But the first episode of this, and knowing there was a second to come, my God, I felt it was slow. And in the case of the memory cheating, I thought the Doctor, when he got down into the pit, and he met the creature in the pit, I thought he actually spoke to that creature. And I guess he does speak, but the creature doesn't talk back. All of its talking is done elsewhere. The Doctor just acts against this roaring, mindless monster. I'd completely forgotten that. I thought he went down into the pit and had a conversation with Satan, you know?
Yes.
And I thought, oh, no, that doesn't actually happen. I made a note that the Doctor and Rose were a bit obnoxious at the start of this one. Probably their most obnoxious since Tooth and Claw.
Mm-hmm.
So I will note that. I've been noting the episodes where I don't think it was happening, but here I think it was. But on the whole, it's a hard one to discuss because I've always liked it, but I started to see flaws in this one. It was similar to School Reunion in that sense, that this is something I've really liked, and maybe I've just overcooked it in my brain to the point where when I do rewatch it, I think, oh, was it actually as good as I thought it was?
And what did you score it?
Well, I said a moment ago it's an 8.5. Let's go 8.5. It's still really good, but it's not quite as good as I thought it was.
So that's equal with your best so far?
It is.
Okay. I've given out 2 A's so far this season, and with this one, I will say it up front, I'm giving out an A+. This to me is one of the top 2 or 3 stories of the Tennant era, and it's probably one of the top 5 or 6 stories of New Who. This is exceptionally good, and I watched it back and was utterly enthralled by it once again. Let's start off with the obvious stuff. It is visually spectacular. Whether it's the black hole, the way the space base is set up, and sorry, my nerdy fanboy heart is just beating for a great big space base on an asteroid under a black hole with cool aliens. Like, this is Doctor Who. This is fantastic.
Their rocket looks pretty cool as well.
The rocket looks cool. The big gnarly monster, I think, has aged far better than a lot of the other effects in this season and still looks really cool and certainly sells the tale. I think the characters are all wonderful. Gabrielle Wolfe coming back to do the voice is spectacular. It is a little bit of a shame that when I watched it, we were all going, does that mean Sutek's back? I hope Sutek's back. I hope he's playing Sutek. And I do think we were let down a bit in the second episode. It's like, oh, it's not Sutek. But relieved of that, it's just great to have that wonderful voice acting back. I love the characters, I love the acting, I love what happens with Yude, I love the threat of the whole thing, I love the captain, he's so good, Mr. Security Guard, he's so good, Toby is a really cool character, the female characters are really wonderful, when that young girl, you know, when she dies, she was only 20, you know, that's a wonderful moment in terms of drama, and that's where this RTD sort of, you know, soapy, touchy-feely stuff blended with you know, outer space sci-fi comes off so well.
Oh, and the brutality we were talking about earlier, like the girl floating in space, that's brutal.
Yeah.
Killing all the Ood.
Yes.
It's pretty brutal too.
Absolutely, and I like it for it. I like it for it. Even watching this again, I kind of vaguely remembered who survived, but I was still getting a bit like, oh, I hope they survive, or I hope, oh no, you know, I was still getting those moments for them. I will say a couple of detracting things. The Dr. Rose stuff is the easiest, weakest stuff of the episode. The bit where they sit down and it was like watching a couple of 16-year-olds flirt. You know, Rose is sort of doing that kind of pathetic. If I keep just mentioning us and a life together in the same sentence, maybe he'll kind of reach that conclusion too. It was really badly written, really pathetic. I don't think Rose is served quite all that well in this episode. She's probably given not much to do at the expense of some of the guests, which is fine. Tennant is really good. I still, though, having watched this many times, don't quite know what happens at the end. I don't quite know why the Doctor had to upset the status quo, because it's sort of like, if I upset the status quo, then I'm falling into your trap. But if I do that, you're falling into their trap. So I'll upset the status quo to end you. But if you just left everything as it was, everything would have been fine. Like there wasn't a sense of, the Beast has been rejuvenating his power and now he can, he's breaking free. It's like, no, he's hypnotised some Ood and they're going to wipe out the base. But, the Ood were going to come and release his chains. And if they had let him out of his intelligence out of the vases, the planet would have tipped into the black hole. So I don't think the ending quite works, but it's one of those very New Who, very RTD things of who cares, I'm just having great fun with the action. So, look, a couple of faults, but basically an A+ from me.
It is a good story. I just wanted to reinforce that for me, it's one of these ones where I've really liked it and gone back and found it wasn't as good, which is the opposite to other episodes where I've gone, I'm not so sure about this, and I've actually liked it more when I've gone back, like Idiot's Lantern, for example.
No, fair enough, but no, A+.
Very good.
Love and Monsters.
Yeah, this is you leading, I think.
It is. I have seen this twice. I saw it on broadcast, and I saw it about a year later to see if it was what I remembered, but I haven't seen it for a long time.
Okay.
Going into it, I definitely noticed just how much the cast, and this is true of a lot of the era, were very much hot property at the time. Like, I sort of went through each member of the cast and said, I remember you being big in this at the time. You're in The Bill at the time, and you're in Harry Potter at the time, and you're in State of Play at the time, and they're all really quite big names.
Oh, well, Mark Warren, who plays Elton Pope,
yes.
I guess in theory he's almost the lead for this story. He was in one of the later episodes of Spooks, and I did that big Spooks rewatch recently.
Oh, right, yes.
I was like, it's Elton from Love and Monsters.
No,
but in that, he's a stone cold killer.
Yeah, no, I certainly remember there was sort of 3 or 4 years after this, was like, there's that guy from Love and Monsters again. Like, he was really big at the time, and he's still quite big, but that was definitely very big.
Yeah.
Watching this, I was reminded in some ways of some episodes of Babylon 5, where JMS as a showrunner would decide that he needed to shake things up a bit and do an episode with something a bit different. So he would reach into his writer's tool bag and grab something very different and say, this is what I'm doing this time. And that's clearly what RTD is doing here. He said, I need to shake this up. I need to do something very different. So he's doing it from a different perspective. It's being done as a piece of evidence, if you like, a story being told by someone outside the TARDIS group from that person's perspective, which is interesting. And I'm watching it and I'm quite engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Then it just starts to kind of become a bit boring. And then the characters just sort of start to do stuff. I'm just going, why are they doing that? Then the villain arrives and he's just so obviously wickedly bad. You kind of go, why are they even listening to this guy? And then he becomes the Absorbaloff, and then you're just sort of taking these lovely, wonderful people that we've made a point of going are very lovely, ordinary people, and killing them horribly. The Doctor doesn't really seem to care that they've all died horribly. It ends up very unpleasantly. I think the resolution for Elton is and his girlfriend sits very badly with me. I went from quite enjoying this and quite engaged and intellectually engaged by it to being quite bored by it to being quite turned off by it, which was a shame. And I've given it a D. I can't give it any higher because it left me in a very sour mood, I've got to say.
Yeah, that final line about their love life, I still can't believe ended up in a kid's show.
No, it's very distasteful.
However, let's rewind to the start. This has always been a controversial episode
Absolutely.
with fandom.
Yeah.
But I've got to say, the first time I saw it, I kind of liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was this riff on fandom. It was exactly like our local fan group that we had back in the late 80s, with the way that we'd all come together for the Doctor Who. And in this case, literally these characters had come together for the Doctor Who because they're looking for the Doctor. But then in this fan group, we all had other interests that we brought to the table. So I have very vivid memories when I was, say, 13, 14 years old. We'd gather for our overnight Doctor Who meeting, on a Friday night or a Saturday night. This happened once or twice a year. It'd be like, let's watch Doctor Who all night and have a sleepover. And that eventually morphed into us changing into army clothes. And my friend lived on this acreage. And we'd all go off and hide in the dark in army clothes and sort of play this advanced game of murder in the dark for most of the evening rather than watching Doctor Who. So I've actually been in a fan group where you've come together for one thing, but then you've morphed into something else. And for us, it was like playing soldiers in the dark. And here they form a band, for example. So I was like, oh, I get that. And then this guy joins the group who doesn't quite fit. And yeah, I get that too, because that happened both at a local level and a sort of a state level. And I think because of the nature of these fan groups, they sort of get accepted, and it's like, oh, that guy's a bit of a bastard, or that guy's a bit of a prick, whatever. But they still get accepted in these fan groups. And so that sort of rang true to me, that although you're saying he's so blatantly evil, why are they following him? I'm thinking, well, it's kind of how the fan groups are. Someone comes in who no one likes, but no one wants to sort of stand up and say, we don't like you, get out. And so they sort of end up staying. So to me, all of these sort of fan references were ringing true. I've never had a beef with the story, even the Absorbaloff being absolutely bonkers. I think the story sets out to do what it wants to do, which is to be just weird and bonkers and a riff on fandom and all that sort of stuff. The ending is, like I say, I can't believe it's in a children's show, but I don't think I have quite the reaction that you have. So for me, this is 7 out of 10 territory. Again, I'm not saying, oh, it's the most wonderful thing ever. Wasn't it so different and zany and wacky and all of that? It's an episode, but I'm not down on it, I don't think, like you are.
Fair enough. Fear Her, the one that I think most fans would certainly say has the reputation as the worst of the season. And I think there was even a DWM poll where it was like not only the only New Who story in the bottom 30 or 40, but like at the bottom, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this was the episode of the series that I disliked the most, and subsequently seen the least. And that was without being in sort of organised fandom too much at the time. I just really disliked it, and when I got into fandom a bit more and realised everyone else disliked it, I thought, yep, they're quite right. What's interesting is that I was some way into my rewatch here, and I wasn't minding it. And I kept asking myself again, does the memory cheat? What did I actually have a beef with? Because I've gotten into it quite some way here, and this is fine, and that was actually good. What is going on? Have I massively misremembered this? Has all of fandom misremembered this? And then the child got possessed and did the whispering voice thing, Dave. She whispers like this, and, I'll stop talking like that.
Please.
Which I think is probably really good acting for a child of that age. I think she's like, oh, I've got to pretend to be possessed. I'll do this voice. And, I think that's probably quite good for that child at that age. But I just found it annoying to watch. And then the whole thing just falls into a heap. And I was like, that's why I disliked it. Thank you. It took a while to happen, but there it is. But it was probably still a bit better than my memory had let me think. I think I'd concentrated more on the ending and thought, yeah, that was crap. And so the whole thing was crap. Overall, I'd throw maybe a 5 out of 10 at it, something like that, which actually feels harsh, but it's not really. I think 5 out of 10 is fair for this.
I thought Fear Her was fine.
Wow, okay.
Not good, not amazing, but fine. I got to the end of it, I thought, that was okay. It certainly wasn't the absolute disaster that I was expecting or that I remembered. Yes, the Scribble Monster special effect is embarrassingly bad. Yeah. And yes, it kind of gets a bit weird and silly towards the end. Is it an episode I'm going to come back to again in a hurry? No, it's not. I did feel very sorry for poor Hugh Edwards having to do that commentary. Oh, look, everybody's disappeared. I wonder what that means. This is a terrible thing for the games. There's some terrible lines in that I can only assume is meant to sound disingenuous, but it's not good.
Yeah.
I thought it was fine. I don't really have much more to say about that. I've given it a C, which is the same as I gave New Earth. And I think both of them are very simple, fine little pieces of television. Not great, they're okay.
Talking about you saying you weren't too sure about the end of the Satan Pit and what actually really happened, I wasn't too sure about this one because Billy Piper goes running after the Olympic torch, does that ridiculous toss of the rock, which is really a spaceship, into the Olympic torch at quite some distance. And that sort of frees these creatures or whatever it does, it heats them up and off they go. Why then is the drawing of the girl's father in the cupboard still alive? Because I thought all these drawings were sort of, being animated by the aliens. Why is that still a thing if the problem has been solved? I didn't get that. And I just thought, oh, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, look, it's only got a C. and that's because the plot doesn't really work. But as a piece of, 45-minute drama, I thought it was fine. I didn't walk away hating this in the way I walked away really disliking Love and Monsters.
Into the final two-part now, Dave.
Wow. My first time watching these in 15 years.
No, really?
Really. I detested these when I watched them.
Then or now?
Then, let me hasten to add, then. I will say up front, I have improved my view of these quite a bit rewatching them. Okay. Once again, the things that I remembered being particularly bad actually weren't that big a part of what was going on. There's a lot in the first episode particularly I liked. I like the setup. It's really interesting. It's really intriguing. I like the way that we go straight into, right, there are ghosts. This is what we're talking about. And then we get a Cyberman 11 minutes in, and then the ghosts turn into Cybermen fairly quickly. Like this really goes quite fast. I just like the whole, I'm Rose and this is how I died. It's like, we know you're not dying. And pretending you are is just trying to turn the feels up to 11, and that I find disingenuous. I don't like that. The Ghostbusters gag just made me go out loud, ugh.
Why does he do a Scooby-Doo voice when he does that?
I don't know. I don't know.
That always confused me. I thought you're mashing up two different things there, Dave.
Yvonne is
Dave Tennant, that is.
Yes, that's right. Yvonne is an interesting character. Like, she does feel very hastily written. It's sort of like she's obsessed by the British Empire and she reads a lot of modern management practices, so therefore she's awful. And that seems like be a little bit too easy and too simple. But I like what Torchwood is doing. I really, really, really like the premise of Torchwood at this point. That idea that, yes, mankind is salvaging alien tech and using it to advance. I think that's a really interesting, clever idea. Mickey comes back and he's all about the Cybermen. That's really cool. The cliffhanger is a really effective misdirect where you think it's going to be all about the Cybermen, and the Cybermen are like, well, what sphere? We don't know. The sphere's not ours. Who cares about the sphere? It's like, oh, well, what's the deal with the sphere? And you get a really good, exciting cliffhanger.
Yeah.
The idea of Cybermen versus Daleks should never have been done on screen, because it can never be as good as you expect it to be. And the big problem here is having spent an episode building up, in fact, having spent a season in some ways building up the Cybermen as the big bad of the season, to then have the Daleks come in and basically wipe them out ridiculously easily with a bit of bitchy banter in between is a letdown. Nicholas Briggs is really struggling with the Dalek voices in this one. He is great at doing a Dalek voice. He's not good at doing multiple Dalek voices. Certainly here, he might improve as things go on, but he's really struggling here. Rose talking about how awesome she is really boring to me. Like, I'm Rose and I did this. And oh, shut up. If you need to tell us, it's not good. But there's some really cool excitement and adventure and action happening, and that kind of kept me going in a way that Age of Steel didn't keep me going. So I respect that. It's very easy to pull apart the second half of this, and I did start to do that. But I do need to stress the action is really good, and that keeps us going. So I think the second half is weaker, but still a fun watch. I want to talk about the conclusions separately, but I'll give you a chance to talk a bit about the episodes first.
Okay. Well, similar to Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, this was one I knew I liked going in, and one that I'd seen a few times over the years. But similar to those episodes, the rewatch took it down a notch for me. It's still maybe an 8 out of 10 kind of proposition for me. It still has some great lines. It still has spectacle, even if some of it is a bit silly. Especially when all the Daleks are getting sucked into the back into the building. And they're all getting sucked in, like thousands of Daleks are getting sucked through basically like a window. And I thought that just wouldn't work like that. They'd start hitting the building and start smashing the building. I'm I'm nitpicking.
So did you also notice that the Genesis Ark doubles in size between the set and the CGIs outside?
Yes. Look, it splits up the Doctor and Rose in a brutal way. It has that awesome piece of music when that happens with that bass line and all that sort of stuff. So it still does a lot of good stuff, but again, I think it's overcooked in my mind over the years. Mm-hmm. And when I was actually watching it, it no longer lived up to what it was in my head. It's certainly nowhere near what I thought it was back in 2006. Back in 2006, I disagree with you here. I would have said, oh, that's 10 out of 10, and I felt completely moved by it and thought it was the best of what New Who could deliver. I was blown away by this back in the day, and now I just see it as like an 8 out of 10. Yeah, that was good, but it's not what I thought it was.
It's really interesting you say that, because I would also say that my memory overcooked that ending, but because I saw it in a negative way, it overcooked it in a heightenedly bad way, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. There is a moment where the Doctor's explained what the plan is and what everybody has to do, where the Doctor sneaks up behind Rose, he puts the teleporting, dimension-jumping thing on her, and zaps them all into another reality. And I thought, that is such a cool moment and such a Doctor moment to take the decision out of the companion's hands, because it's the right thing to do on a bigger scale. And it reminded me of Tom's Doctor putting Sarah Jane off the TARDIS. You know, it was that moment of, you can't come with me anymore, and just doing it.
It's something I expect Smith to do.
Yeah, Smith. Yeah, absolutely. Smith, Tom.
From Tenet, it's almost unexpected.
Yeah, and that really heartens. I thought that is such a cool moment. Totally undermined by the fact that she just presses it again 6 seconds later, and she's back. And to give us this really sort of forced moment. Now, having a number of times on this podcast called out Jodie Whittaker's Doctor for being a bit pathetic and sort of just being helpless and not liking it, I do have to say I got the same vibe when Rose is struggling to hold on and all the rest of it, and the Doctor's just like reaching out to her, and he's utterly pathetic and utterly helpless and acting kind of, you know, pathetic. And I didn't like that. I do think it's cool that Pete's the one who gets to save her. I think it's cool that she goes back to the other world. Look, I do understand, I do accept that the only way for Rose to leave the Doctor was to have no choice.
Yeah.
But I would have liked it to have been done that first way, not that second way. I don't buy the whole burning up a star to say goodbye sort of thing. It's like, you know, have a bit of class and go out at the right spot. Now, I would fully accept, if you're somebody who totally buys the idea of the Doctor and Rose as emotional lovers, intellectual lovers, and potentially even physical lovers, if you buy into that sort of dynamic, you know, to go back to our theme of the episode, or one theme of the episode, that soap opera dynamic of we care about the relationship more than the plot, I get that would be a huge, like, oh my god, teary sort of moment. I don't. I'm more interested in lots of cool Daleks shooting lots of cool laser beams, because I'm, you know, emotionally stunted or something, maybe, I don't know. so the whole sort of falls flat.
Yeah. So
look, this episode went up considerably in my view. I've given the whole thing a B. I really like the first half. The second half is fine. The Cybermen are wasted. Sorry. The moment the Daleks come on screen, nobody cares about the Cybermen anymore, including the scriptwriter. And the ending's a bit forced. But lots of cool moments. Lovely to see Mickey back. Lovely to see Jake back. Lovely to see Pete Tyler back. Glad to see the end of Rose's mum. I know a lot of people love her. I don't. I'm sorry. As I said, it's gone from a story I thought was really terrible to a B. Like a lot of this series, a lot of it I have come back and thought of a lot more fondly. I haven't elevated all of it to greatness, but a lot of ones I had clouded memories of, I've just enjoyed.
Yeah, well, there's nothing here that I'm saying, 10 out of 10, or even 9 out of 10, you know?
Well, look, I've given 1 A+ and 2 A's, and I think they are my favourite 3 of the series. And look, I've given a D, but everything else is a C or above, and that's all very watchable.
Should we summarise all of this, Dave?
So, a couple of summary points that I wanted to make. The first is a point that we raised a bit in our episode some years ago on Queer in Who. And it really stood out to me watching this episode back, just how much there was a sort of a like gay but not gay vibe all the way through this. You have Ricky, who was written to be the lover of Jake, and then they cut the scene where they reveal it. But it's very clear watching Jake's reaction to Ricky's death that is clearly what the character was meant to be, but they pull back from going on screen. Tommy and the Idiot's Lantern was in the first draft of the script, written to overtly be gay and actually have a crush on the Doctor. And they pulled that back, although again in the dialogue, if you know what you're looking for, it's clearly there.
The Mummy's Boy line.
The Mummy's Boy line, a whole lot of stuff about that. Yeah. Toby in the Satan's Pit is, again, kind of hinted and can be read as being gay. There are other examples, all of which the show pulls back from. And it just, I thought, was so interesting. Disappointing in a way, but so of its time. Like, in 2006, even Russell T Davies' Doctor Who wasn't willing to actually go on screen, that character is gay. There were several times they've gone really close, but they didn't quite do it.
And so much for the so-called gay agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I want to make that general point. Otherwise, I enjoyed watching this. It has been elevated in my view. There are lots of good adventures. There's only one that I think is overtly bad, and there are two that I think are mostly harmless. There's one I love, A+, two I really enjoy, A's. I do stand by my view that the Doctor and Rose together are often annoying, and they are a big weakness of the series, but I have appreciated that the Doctor on his own and Rose on her own are both really strong still, and so that's been a positive that I've taken away. David Tennant here is really engaging, and he's not the over-the-top mugger that I remember him being, I suspect because that's what he's going to become in later series. David Tennant went up again in my estimation watching this, but overall, it felt like a very consistent season. It felt like a very consistent vibe all the way through. And I'm very, very glad I have rewatched a lot of these because I have enjoyed it far more than I expected.
Excellent. Well, if I average out all these scores I've been giving throughout this, I arrive at a 7.4 out of 10. And without Fear Her basically pooping the bed, that would have been a lot higher. You know, I think this is a very good series. And I think the fact that Doctor Who turned white hot after this is for a reason. You know, populations of people don't just randomly say something's good or bad. In many ways, this is the reverse of what's happening with the Whittaker era right now. There's broadly this negative feeling around it, and the ratings sort of reflect it. But I don't think it's some accident that happened, you know, as some on Twitter might want you to believe. Oh, it's just some people. It's just sort of an accident. You know, it's actually really good. No, I think broadly people saying the Whittaker era is not great because broadly that's what people think. And here it's the reverse. You know, Doctor Who didn't accidentally become mega in the Tennant era. It happened because of this solid set of stories, the Doctor companion interactions, stuff we hadn't seen before, which I guess becomes harder when you're making Series 13 this year, you know, rather than back in Series 2. I find it hard to fault this as a collection of stories, and it's not even my favourite Tennant series. So, you know, how's that for scary? As good as this is, I don't think it's his peak. And maybe not his peak personally, but his era's peak is what I'm trying to say.
To come back to the point that I raised right at the start where we talked about our memories of this, I am very happy to say that the episodes that I thought personally, as a fanboy, were just fine, you could also say were incredibly accessible. And I totally get why something like Doomsday, which I say, look, that's fine, it was a good adventure, it's a B. A casual viewer, not even a casual fan, a casual viewer could watch and just enjoy. I totally understand why this was a success, even if it wasn't quite the hard, gritty Season 7, Season 18 Doctor Who that I would like. I think it does it very, very well, and it's very accessible.
Yeah, and look, to conclude, I want to say, I think 15 years on, because it is 15 years as we mentioned earlier,
yes,
some people out there are starting to forget how white hot all this was and how this kicked it off.
That's right.
Or they didn't really grasp it at the time, because someone who's, say, 20 years old today, you know, they're out there on Twitter tearing it up, having an opinion on everything. They were only 5 when this came out. They could have watched it, sure, their parents probably put it on for them, and maybe even watched it in the years since, but I don't think at the time, when they were 5 years old, they would have really grasped what was happening in the broader fandom at the time. And guys, if you weren't there, it was huge. It was mega, and with good reason.
Yeah, I think that's my final point as well. I've come to appreciate this series more on the rewatch. I've enjoyed it more, but the big outstanding memory I have of 2006 and Doctor Who is walking into the ABC shop and just seeing piles, literal piles and display stands of Doctor Who merchandise with David Tennant and Billy Piper on it, and just thinking, this is like nothing in my lifetime. This is insane. Yeah. This is nuts. This is nuts. This is mainstream, and watching it back, I can see exactly why it was. It balances the Doctor Who fan and the casual viewer in a very perfect way, and credit to it for doing that.
Absolutely.